Today's session is our October 2020 edition. This is the second part of our two-part safety series entitled Mind the Gap, and it is hosted by Laurie Brookhouse of Farm Safety Nova Scotia. So I've got a photo there of Laurie on the screen, and you'll be able to see her shortly. Laurie is an alumni of the Nova Scotia Agricultural College, where she successfully gained the biology technology program and spent many hours with axes, saws, and other sharp, pointy objects playing woodsman. So a good fit for her to be in farm safety. Today, Laurie is a Canadian registered safety professional, and for the last 24 years, she has taken a lead on safety, whether it was in a veterinary lab, University of Calgary's animal facility, a vet clinic, or her husband's tree business. And she says she's done that because nobody else ever wanted to do it or they didn't know how. A landscape company asked her to evaluate their safety program a while back, and she was then referred to the next in creating Vital Insight, which is a national safety and HR consulting firm across Canada. She was referred to the Farm Safety Advisor position at Farm Safety Nova Scotia as someone the ag industry needed to help farmers with their safety programs. And after 2 interviews, she's here today presenting Mind the Gap, Farm, a communication tool that is used to build a farm safety plan and a positive safety culture on your farm. So Laurie, thank you for joining us. I'm going to head to my last slide and then I will switch it over to you. Just wanted to mention, we won't be having a lunch break session in December because it's well into the Christmas season, but our next session will be a new entrant lecture. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and let Laurie take over as our guest speaker. Thank you again for being here, Laurie.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. And yes, we're going to learn Mind the Gap, Farm, and what that means for you and in safety. So just a little bit, you've heard a little bit about me, so I'm going to give you a little bit about Farm Safety Nova Scotia. We're a not-for-profit, industry-driven organization that help give you the tools and resources you need to keep your farmers, your farm families, and all of your employees safe. So Mind the Gap, what does that mean? GAP stands for Good Analytical Practice. So it's actually a tool to communicate your farm safety plan on farm and to control hazards. So it's a process for safety. And it's a process as well to engage your workers to have good safe work practice, safe job procedures by engaging and using that slow part of their brain, which hopefully will in turn reduce your incident and injury rates on farm. So you see this graphic on the left. We're going to break this down into several components, focusing on the bottom half through the latter part of the presentation. But I'm going to give you some background on this at the beginning here. So ultimately, you can actually train your brain to farm safe. You just need the tools to be able to figure out how to do that. But one of the key things as part of this system or process is to identify that fatigue plays a key role. And 39 to 67% of the world's workforce is actually sleep deprived. So in order to engage your better mind frame, we have to have processes in place to be able to work safely. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to break this down. Just hang on 1 second. So there's 2 parts of your brain that you need to engage. Fast brain will come in handy sometimes, and then the slow brain comes in handy at other times. More so, this is the brain that you want to engage to be safe on farm. So fast brain is your preconscious, automatic, habitual thinking. So you want to basically use this to process information very quickly and give feedback. But during that time, you miss a lot of fine details. It only takes 0.4 of a second to activate this part of your brain. There's really no interference for this part of the brain to activate, but it is subject to frequent errors. So looking at the slow part of the brain, this is where we do our conscious, analytical, reasoned thinking, reflective and thoughtful thinking as well. The bad news is it takes approximately 1 second for this part of the brain to activate. And if you're fatigued, it takes even longer. But the whole goal of this part of the brain is to basically work through steps and processes and evaluate the work that you're doing. It results in fewer errors overall. So by training yourself to engage your slow brain, you can begin to successfully mind the gap So you'll have good analytical practice. So this is the breakdown of Mind the Gap Farm. So there's three main components. The first one we're going to look at is fatigue at risk management. This plays a huge role, as you've discovered already. And as well, we're going to look at first always right-minded, and then focused approach, right method. So this part down here is where we get the tools and resources to build that farm safety plan. First always right-minded is how we're going to communicate it and hopefully manage fatigue so it works and it functions well to engage the slow part of the brain. So fatigue at risk management. As you know, fatigue is a hazard like any other hazard on the farm. So it could be machinery, chainsaws, axes, machetes, driving on the woods roads, shearing Christmas trees, chemicals or pesticides that you're using to apply to the trees. So fatigue, as we know, results in that slower reaction time, but it can also result in lack of really good judgment. You could become more easily distracted, not being able to concentrate on the tasks that you normally could focus on and do well with, but also poor quality of work. So more mistakes may happen. The first 5 signs and symptoms here you're probably familiar with. So it's the remainder signs and symptoms you may have ignored or not paid close attention to prior. So the inability to concentrate on tasks, difficulty remembering things that would easily come to you before, forgetting to relay messages or doing specific things that would be normal part of your routine. You're not able to anticipate hazards. There could be an increase in injury and incident rates on the farm, increase in errors, poor quality work we talked about. You could be quiet and withdrawn, so staying away from others and just trying to work with what you have to do amongst yourself. Not good energy levels, and you could be unmotivated. So the causes. So it could be an underlying medical condition, so it's a good idea to go get checked out by your health practitioner. But it could also be as simply as not sleeping your 7 to 9 hours. And in this time of year, how many of you are in this little ballpark figure here? Are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep? So how do you make up for that? I'll show you some tools later. But also it could be your work demands. Labor shortages, is that a problem? Do you always have to do more with less? How's the weather? And then look at our government regulations, and most in particular, and recently, the COVID-19 imposed restrictions. That changes how we can perform work, as well as, and as always, financial pressures. And I'm sure you could give me a list of several more that could be added on to that. So here's the effect on mental health. So with a lack of sleep, treating a sleep disorder may alleviate the symptoms of a mental health problem. So there is possibility with a little bit of sleep that could be recovered. Studies suggest that a good night's sleep helps foster both mental and emotional resilience. But also, sleep disruption wreaks havoc in the brain, impairing thinking and emotional regulation as well. Chronic sleep deprivation sets the stage for negative thinking and emotional vulnerability. Are we overreacting? Not reacting? Insomnia can actually amplify the effects of psychiatric disorders. As those with mental health problems, my little wiggly line there, are more likely to have insomnia or other sleep disorders. So here's how we can reduce fatigue. It's possibilities. If you recognize the signs and symptoms, you may be able to mitigate them. If you know the effects fatigue has on you, and if it impairs you, then you may be able to basically mitigate that risk and be able to put things in place so that you do lower at-risk items earlier in the day and then, lower at-risk items later in the day and then higher risk items when you're feeling more refreshed in the morning, early afternoon. Use a system to mitigate the risk. Have an incident reporting process. Gain information on how fatigue plays a role if you have that as part of your incident reporting process. Perhaps use a fatigue calculator. We have done this in Cultivating Your Way to Burnout, looking at how that actually affects you. And this is the fatigue calculator. So it gives you some instruction and background at the beginning, and then the bulk of it is here. So this basically runs through a simple calculation of the hours that you've slept and rest, and then with an interpretation tool. This area here is just an example to run you through how to do the calculation, but you can be at a 0 from all the way 11 and up. So interesting information there if you're curious. So moving on, you may want to consider doing a fatigue at risk management policy. So what that means is, how do you plan based on how you work on your firm to mitigate the risk of hazards of fatigue on the firm? So it doesn't have to be elaborate, and I have samples for you on the farm safety site. They're just taking a minute here to load today. Hang on there. So this is a simple policy, gives you the purpose of it, definitions of fatigue, restorative sleep, sleep cycles, your general commitment to why you want to do this, and then the responsibilities of those participating in the actual fatigue at risk management program. And then, of course, as mentioned, here is where you access these resources as part of Mind the Gap, farm. So you can see it's farmsafetyns.ca up here. And there's the fatigue at risk management post. But to gain the full Mind the Gap series, it's here under resources. Oops, I just clicked that twice. And fatigue at risk management program. And then you can see recognizing fatigue, quality sleep makes a difference, fatigue risk management system, incident report form, so you can download that and use it as your own, just make some adjustments, the fatigue calculator, and a sample policy as well. So the second part I want to focus on is first always right-minded. So this is all about the culture, and there's a question in Al's presentation in September is, how do you deliver this? And the big part of delivering a safety program is through positive reinforcement. So how the language you use to communicate your plan. So according to the relationship between engagement at work and organization outcomes by Harder et al. And Gallup in 2016, they noticed there's a clear connection between safety culture and the safe work performance. The study showed that 78% of the higher success rate in businesses had an engaged workforce. 70% of those had fewer incidents, and 41% had less absenteeism. So to farm your positive safety culture, we have to change our messaging. So change the message from urgent tone. So do you see yourself in this as hurry up, get it done. We're on a deadline. This had to be done yesterday. We're behind because it snowed and we can't get in where we need to be. It's common sense. So change the message to, though, take your time. Let's just think it through. Let's focus on doing this job right the first time. Please feel free to ask questions. Don't hesitate to ask for help. So it's that kind of messaging that you're going to get more participation from your workforce. The negative messaging has a tendency for people to close up and block off. So they're going to just do what they feel is best based on their experiences. And that may not be the best for the work or the scope of work that's on your firm. So first, always right-minded, the results. If this actually happens, and it can, increases your farm's sustainability. You actually do the job right the first time, which then in turn increases your efficiency, then encourages the workers to use the slow part of their brain, which we saw at the beginning. It reduces costs related to incident injury, and then employees will actually take ownership in their roles with and on the farm. So the last part, the meat and potatoes, focus approach, right method. So this is where we develop our safe work practice, safe job procedures, outline our policies, and don't be afraid of policies. And a lot of people go, oh, I don't want to be policied to death. But policies are basically where you write your commitment and how you're going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver. And this keeps a consistent message. So if you don't have it written down, worker A will say it one way, one day. Worker A may say it, depending on the circumstances, a different way the next day. And then worker A may say it the same as the first day. But for the 3 different workers that are absorbing the information, it could be interpreted differently. So it's very important to make sure everything you want to communicate consistently is written down and they can read it. So clear, concise, safe work practices and safe job procedures. You want those for the high hazard tasks that you do on the farm. So safe work practices are the do's and don'ts of hazardous tasks. And the safe job procedures are the step-by-step instructions right here. And then of course, your company health and safety policy is just your general overall commitment to health and safety on the farm. So I'm going to show you. When you click Safe Work Practice, Safe Job Procedures here, this will take you back to the Farm Safety Nova Scotia website, where we have templates for building these, and you can see how they should read. So back to the farmsafetyns.ca website, under resources and a guide to your farm safety plan. We're going to go a little bit more in depth there in a little bit. And then in section 4 of the workbook, which you will find on the right-hand side at the bottom, you would just click workbook to bring up this page. So in here is where you would find different safe work practices. And the particular safe work practices are identified by SWP. So if you clicked chainsaw, and this is not your industry specific, this is general overall. I'm just gonna open it here. But we are working on building an industry specific program. So specifically for Christmas tree growers. So if you look at this, in the safe work practice, we have related documents, when to use it, the hazards and risks associated with using a chainsaw, personally protective equipment that should be worn, training requirements, communication process, equipment and supplies that you may need, and then the general practice. And we've included starting the chainsaw down below. So you can use those as your own templates, just read through and adjust for your particular farm scope of work and how you run your operations. We're going to come back to this in a few minutes. We're going to deep dive into that. So still, focus approach method. In Al's presentation, he went through all of these components and gave you the details of what is included in each of these components. So we're not going to spend too much time here because I'm going to basically in another few slides show you where to access templates to build this yourself. But first, I want to show you how you communicate mind the gap. So if you see someone doing something unsafe or there's an unsafe condition, the language you could use is say mind the gap. It's less intimidating and starts a conversation versus what are you doing? What the heck? Stop. So use different language. So you can see this fellow. So you're seeing Johnny standing on a ladder, and he has one foot on the ladder and the other foot on a tree limb. And he's saying, and you say, hey, Johnny, mind the gap. And Johnny says, what? You say, mind the gap, good analytical practice. Our safe work practice for ladders mentions we should keep both feet on the ladder to prevent it from tipping over. What are your thoughts? So this way you're inviting a conversation. You're not making an accusation. You're exploring why you have this in place together. So Johnny says, well, there was a branch that I couldn't quite reach, so I thought it would be quick just to go over there and do it this way. And it would take too much time to get down, move the ladder, and just make that one cut. You say, at ADC Farm, we mind the gap, and it's okay to take the time and follow the safe work practice to make sure that you go home at the end of the day in the same condition you arrived. Now you can change your language a little bit in there. This was very rehearsed and structured, but keeping within that same positive format and inviting conversation from that worker is going to be key. So here's what I promised, building a farm safety plan. So if I click here, it goes back to our website, which I've shown you already, but it will go to the main page of the resources. So as I mentioned, farmsafetyns.ca, resources, and then here we've just gone to the first page of a guide to your farm safety plan. And so here in this main page, you can click this PDF, and it's a downloadable PDF. And it opens up the full guide to a farm safety plan. And this is available in print as well. If you need to, if you have a very poor internet connection or it takes a while to download, I can provide this on a USB and mail it out to you if that's much easier. So here it goes through 5 sections. where we really get into the meat and potatoes is section 2. So I'm just going to scroll to section 2 because I want to show you a little hint and tip here. Section 1 is just a lot of background and the importance of building your farm safety plan, the legislation components and things like that. Section 2 is gets into completing your self-assessment, which tells you components that you may need. But what I want to highlight here in the full guide is this. So this check mark with the box is reference to a template. So whenever you see one of these, there is an actual workbook template. So there is a self-assessment available that you can click and download for yourself. So to match this easily, so you see it here, and easily match it to the workbook, which I'm going to show you how to access in a second here. Note the page. This page number is used to label the document that this goes to. So you say, okay, I'm conducting a self-assessment. We have a check mark. This is on page 2:3. So let's go back. On the right-hand side is where all your sections are, section 1. And as you can see, there's no workbook listing here. So there's no templates for section 1. But you scroll to section 2. Here's your workbook templates. So if I click here, and if you look here, 2:3, self-assessment checklist. So you can click on this. It opens up into a Word document. Slowly, a Word document. And you can use this. You can add your own farm name and just use this to evaluate what you currently have, or just even to discover what you may need to start your farm safety plan. So there's a ton of resources available in each of these sections. So you can see how many are available just in section 2. Under safe work practices, was in section 4. So this is where I mentioned controlling the hazards. If you click here, you can see where we had all the safe work practices listed. Okay, so also, as we're building your commodity specific plan, and I believe, and Jay, you can interject if our timelines change a bit, we plan to hope to deliver this by January once everything is built and reviewed. So your plan will be here under commodity plans. So if you click there, you'll see we've built one commodity plan already, and it's for fruit growers. And it's set up essentially the same as what I just showed you. It's broken into sections. So if we go to section 4 where safe work practices were held, you'll click section 4, scroll, and you can see here how many specific safe work practices were built for fruit growers. And you click on those and it has the same format as I showed you prior. Very easy to use. So again, that is at farmsafetyns.ca. Clicking on resources and a guide to your farm safety plan. This gives you the basic plan, and then your commodity specific plan will be housed here once it's complete in January. If you need additional help, we have that. So we have training available to help build your farm safety plan. And if you want more background on each of those documents, why it's there, why you may need to use it or may not need it for your particular farm, we're holding a Build a Farm Safety Plan webinar on December 15th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Just go on to our website again. I can actually show you. I'll open it up here. And we actually walk through each of those templates and what they do. And some of them we practice, which is kind of cool. So you can kind of get the feel of how to complete a hazard assessment form, worksite inspection, and see how that all works. So if you're interested in attending, news and events, click events. And then you're just going to scroll. There's a list you can use. You can use months or a list in December. And this is a free webinar. Click Building a Farm Safety Plan on December 15th. And just click there to register. So just in summary, the whole process of Mind the Gap is good analytical practice. So engaging that slow part of the brain and understanding what prevents that from being engaged and being able to use this to communicate your farm safety plan, being the base for that process for safety and engaging that slow part of the brain, which helps reduce incident injury. And Jay, I'm going to roll that over to you for questions. I think Jay too, at any point in time, anybody has questions about any of this material, they can feel free to email, call me as well at Farm Safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lori's contact information is very easy to find on the farm safety website, and I'll type it into the chat so that you have it right away.
Thank you.
If you forget who you're trying to reach out to, you can always send me an email and I can put you in contact with Lori pretty easily as well.
Perfect.
Okay, Lori, I think we should get started.
Okay, I'm ready.
Question. What is included in an industry-specific program/plan?
So that depends on your specific industry. So what we're doing is a series of interviews right now. Jay has sent those out. Typically we do these interviews and evaluate the farms in person. With COVID-19, that's become a little bit more of a challenge this year. And so what I'll do is actually evaluate your whole entire scope of work and then use that and implement that into your farm safety plan. So you're getting more specific information such as safe work practices on shearing, axes, machetes, balers, harvesters, and things like that. Whereas you saw in the fruit growers plan, they had more specific safe work practices specifically for the operations for the orchard, using mobile picker platforms and things like that. So we tried to change the wording and the language within your policies, procedures as well, and how maybe fall protection is used if that's something you do use. Anything how you work is going to be reflected right into the language of those policies, procedures, practices, templates, everything.
Okay, and where should these policies be located? Like, should they be, I guess my interpretation of the question is, should they be in a binder in a formal meeting room? Should they be provided during orientation? What's your recommendation for that?
Several places these can be posted. It is always good to house a nice clean copy for reference for you in a binder, but for key things that you want to communicate, I would post in obvious places throughout the farm if you have places to do that. Send them out and with pay stubs and other methods if you don't have the ability to post on farm. If you spend a lot of time in the field, you don't want a board in the middle of the field with a bunch of paper on it. So your best bet is to maybe send them out in pay stubs too. You can send them out in print form. Links to the server if you have one available if you're a larger farm. You also want to be able to easily communicate that. So you want to keep the language simple so that people will actually pull that out as well. Some farms, depending on how you run, keep them in like a simple version of the actual safety plan in their vehicles in a duotang. So the key things you want to communicate on a regular basis.
All right. And what is necessary in terms of those templates? So I guess to meet legislation requirements, how much information is the minimum that's required to have in your operating procedure for each individual task or hazard?
So that's also going to be farm specific. So, and I can help you with an evaluation with our on-farm advisory services, because not every farm is going to need everything that is specific. And it's also important to note that you don't have to have a farm safety plan. Farms with workers of 5 or more just require policy and certain components of a farm safety plan, whereas farms with 20 or more workers require a full plan. But depending on what you do on that particular Christmas tree farm will depend on what you should have in place.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. With that, I'm going to let everybody go and finish their lunches. We will have another session last Tuesday in November over the noon hour, and that one's going to be tailored specifically to new entrants. So a wealth of information, just about an inch deep everywhere. So I'm gonna send you off. Have a great rest of the week, rest of October, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you everyone for coming.